I see considerable evidence of obstruction of justice, which is what Mueller said. He lays it out for Congress, and he practically invites Congress to pursue that. Barr took it upon himself to announce that he decided to clear the president. It's not up to him. We need the whole report. We need the whole report, including the underlying documents, unredacted.
Judiciary Chair Jerry Nadler, that's just a few moments ago, slamming the Attorney General yet again and calling for the full, unredacted Mueller report.
Here to react is Mark Levin, host of Life, Liberty, and Levin. Good morning to you, Mark.
Good morning, and it's always good to wake up to a slip-and-fall lawyer like Jerry Nadler. And they'll bring their lawsuit and they'll lose. So this is all about the press. And I'd like to get to that in a minute. But if I could talk about this report. Everybody's focused on Volume 2, aren't they? Including us. Volume 2. What did McGahn say, and why did the president tell McGahn not to say this? Why do we keep focusing on this? This report, Volume 2, doesn't have a syllable of legal significance. There's not a syllable of law in it. It doesn't matter what McGahn said or what the president said. None of it's been tested in a court of law. There's been no challenge to it. There's been no cross-examination, nothing. That's why Mueller wrote this. This is a political document that he should never have written. A political document that's 200 pages long that the press keeps focusing on. That's why he and Weissman and the others wrote it, because he knew he knew CNN would be obsessed with it. He knew that MSNBC would be obsessed with it. This is an op-ed. This is a 200-page op-ed. That's all this is. No prosecutor who wouldn't want to be disbarred would ever produce anything like this, talking, well, this guy said this, and why did the president say that? How do you know? Well, the prosecutor said. Well, who gives a damn what the prosecutor said? He's not God. He's not a judge. He's not a jury.
But Mark, you're quoting the White House counsel. Doesn't whether or not the president told the truth or not matter to you?
It matters completely to me. So how do you know this is truthful, Ed?
He's the White House counsel. You think he lied to the investigator?
How do you know this is truthful, Ed? You have no idea. You know that the prosecutor put words in here that he was told by another individual. That has never been challenged. President says he didn't say that. So you have no idea. I have no idea. That's why we have a court of law. That's why prosecutors, damn it, are not supposed to write essays like this. Now we have a special counsel. And the Democrats knew a special counsel could write a report. They're not focused on Volume 1, which is legal, which does cite law, which was an investigation that found no collusion. That was the purpose of the investigation. Obstruction was not the purpose of the investigation, and he didn't have an obstruction case against the President of the United States, or he would have brought it. I'm using plain English so even Joe Scarborough and Jake Tapper can understand this. Volume 2 is crap. Volume 2 was written for slip-and-fall lawyer Nadler, slip-and-fall lawyer Schiff. That's why he wrote it. He knew the media would run with it. Volume 1, Mr. Mueller should have come up to a microphone 12 months into his investigation and announced to the American people, I have great news. The president didn't collude. His campaign didn't collude. There's no collusion. I'm shutting down this investigation. I got Manafort. I'll give it to the U.S. Attorney in Virginia. I'll give this one to the Southern District of New York. He didn't do it. Why didn't he do that? And right to the end, they're trying to get the president's in-person testimony about something he knew never happened. Collusion. And yet, why is this report even faulty? How can you talk about Russia interference in our election and ignore the Hillary Clinton campaign and the DNC and the senior level of the FBI that's been wiped out by their own conduct? How in the world can you do that, not interview Barack Obama and Susan Rice and all the rest of them? This is a hack job. Now, where are we here? Where are we here? From my perspective, it's now a matter of the American people versus the press, or I would call them the unfree press. We had a report by the Shorenstein Center at Harvard. It's going to be in my new book. The first 100 days of coverage of Trump presidency, they looked at 7 major media outlets, including Fox. CNN and NBC, 90% negative. The rest of the media, 70 to 80% negative. Fox, 52, 48 negative to positive, the only even-handed one. And they said, this is Harvard, not me, in every dimension, the reporting was overwhelmingly negative. This isn't a free press. This isn't serious. They keep bringing this fool Nadler up there. He's going to bring a phony lawsuit. He's going to subpoena this trashing of an Attorney General of the United States who followed the law. I want the American people to understand something real fast. The way the regulation reads is this report, which he didn't have to produce this, the prosecutor, he wanted to produce this. This report goes to the Attorney General of the United States. He's not an observer. He's in the regulation. He decides what to say, what not to say. He decides what's relevant. He's the Attorney General of the United States, not Robert Mueller.
Right,
so they are destroying the Attorney General of the United States. The media are, because they destroy anybody who stands up to the mob.
Well, we're going to see, because the Attorney General is going to be up there on the first and second. I think he'll just do fine for himself, and then we'll go from here. Mark Levin, we're going to watch you the weekend, Life, Liberty, and Levin, and we're going to go
Saturday and Sunday.
And it's not too early to pre-order your book, right?
It's never too early, as you well know, Brian Kilmeade.
On freedom of the press.
All right, the great one. Thank you, Mark.
God bless.
We go straight to this Fox News alert.
That's right. No collusion, no obstruction. After 22 months of investigations, the 448-page Mueller report clears the president and his team of colluding with Russia.
No collusion, no obstruction. This hoax. This should never happen to another president again.
Well, the president greeted with cheers as he arrived at Mar-a-Lago over the Easter weekend. That must have felt good. But this is far from case closed.
The report now sparking new calls from Democrats, at least some of them, for subpoenas, congressional testimony, maybe even impeachment. So let's go straight to Rudy Giuliani. Of course, he is personal attorney for President Trump, former mayor of New York City. You're laughing maybe because, Mr. Mayor, people have been not just pillorying the president, but you and your strategy for a long time and saying that you were making this whole situation worse. Do you feel vindicated this morning?
If I felt vindicated, I wouldn't feel like myself. I mean, there's always somebody criticizing you if you're doing the right thing. So the reality is that, you know, in any fair world, if we were in court, I was just saying that to some of your prior guests. I mean, of course, we didn't want a trial, but if we had had a trial, there'd be a resounding not guilty, not guilty, and the jury had wondered why was this case brought in the first place, because he didn't do anything wrong. And I thought the observations of Mark Penn were really right on point. I mean, he should be a lawyer. I mean, the reality is, if you take all that conduct that they regurgitate into the paper, and you have to understand, some of it is not true.
What do you mean?
Well, the benefit of not testifying is they couldn't trap you into perjury like they did with Flynn, or they could make it up. The detriment of not testifying is there are a lot of things there that are not accurate, as you would imagine. I mean, and some of those things, there are actually versions of they didn't bother to put in there. If you think that was a fairly written report, you know, imagine who was writing it. Andrew Weissman, who's, you know, been reversed by the Supreme Courts with people that were not guilty, who was crying at Hillary Clinton's funeral or whatever that was, you know, when she lost. I mean, that was not a fairly written report. It was a one-sided, highly biased report. So I'm going to assume, though, that everything they wrote there is true, and it's not. But assuming it's all true, Mark Penn is absolutely right. You have to see it in the light of a man who is being accused of a crime he didn't commit. Now, you put yourself in that position. You're accused of not just a crime you didn't commit, you're accused of treason. You're accused of you know, conspiring with not an enemy, but pretty close to an enemy, right? Russia, and to do something horrible. And you know you didn't do it. You know you didn't do it. I know he didn't do it because I was with him. I was with him, you know, 18 hours a day for 4 months, and he wasn't conspiring with anybody but with us to get elected president.
But when it came to obstruction, they said if we had confidence after a thorough investigation of the facts that the president clearly did not commit obstruction of justice, we would so state. So they do not believe after their 22 months they can state that.
They won't believe it until the day they die. They'd still be investigating it if they could. They just believe he's bad, and there must be something bad about him. And just think of how warped what you just read to me is. Read it again.
Okay, if you want. I guess if I get getting orders from my ear, I'm getting orders from
no. Well,
it says if we had confidence after a thorough investigation of the facts.
If we had confidence after a thorough investigation that he didn't do it, when the hell did a prosecutor ever try to figure out if he didn't do it? prosecutors want you to figure out, did you do it? That turns around 2,000 years of Roman, English, and American law, the presumption of innocence. And it's not just a joke. I mean, the reality is, in this case, he really was innocent. But he certainly should be presumed innocent. He doesn't have to prove his innocence. He doesn't have to prove I didn't do it. When can you prove a negative? We were very fortunate in the collusion situation that it is so crazy, so nutty, made up, and boy, you know, that better be investigated. This didn't come out of thin air. This came from somewhere in Europe. That's where it came from. And it was planted.
When did it start? When did the investigation start?
Papadopoulos was the mark. You read his book, read their report. That guy was set up. They gave him the information from a Maltese diplomat, which he then imparts to an Australian diplomat. Just repeating what the Maltese... I mean, it's like, slip it in. This is a completely patented counterintelligence dirty trick. And you got a couple of foreign agents involved. You got a couple of Americans. You want to talk about conspiracy? We can talk about conspiracy. But it's on the other side, not on this side.
Yeah, Rudy, he just tweeted this. He said, statements are made, the president did, statements are made about me by certain people in the crazy Mueller report. In itself, written by 18 angry Democrat Trump haters, which are fabricated and totally untrue. Watch out for people that take so-called notes when the notes never existed until needed, because I never ... I get that's the first part of a tweet he's working on. What's your reaction?
When he talks notes, he's got to be talking about Don McGahn.
No, it can't be possible with all that detail, right? That some of it isn't wrong, and they don't give you the other side of it. I'll give you another big glaring one. If half of what they write about Michael Cohen is true, I'd be surprised. Half of that is perjury. They're writing based on false statements and perjury. The guy should go to jail for more time for the perjury he committed in the course of this investigation and the lying he committed, which is punishable under 18 U.S.C. Section 101. And they don't even bother to give the reader the other side of it, like to say, oh, you know, this guy is somewhat questionable in credibility. He actually just a few weeks ago went in front of Congress and perjured himself 7 times, including saying he wasn't asking for a job. Yeah. Brian knows he was asking for a job.
Well, right? Mr. Mayor,
everybody knows it, and it's on tape, so you don't have to worry. It's on tape. He told it to Chris Cuomo 2 days after the election. He is you got to tell the people. You got to question some of what Cohen is saying because he is a liar.
Well, what is the president just saying, Rudy? Because the person that takes notes is Don McGahn, and because in this document it says, why do you keep, he says to Don McGahn, why do you keep taking notes? He said, because I need to take notes. So I guess he's referring to Don McGahn.
Well, he could be referring to Comey. I'll tell you one that's a phony note. A phony note is that whole thing about, you know, the president told him to go easy on Flynn, or he hoped that he could see his way clear. President says that conversation never took place. He didn't produce those notes until 3 months later. 3 months later, after he was fired, and he changed his whole version of it. He testified under oath, Comey did, that he was never pressured, never directed, never, and then 2 days after being fired, he changed his mind and testified opposite under oath. So I put those two together and say, pal, you got to go to jail for one of those.
Mr. Mayor, real quick, back on the obstruction question with Don McGahn. So if it's established in the report that in the summer of 2017, I believe, the president called McGahn and said, I want you to help me get rid of Mueller, essentially, but no action is taken. So you and others will say, look, there was no obstruction there. But a few months later, the report says the president went back to McGahn and said, you've got to put out a statement, McGahn, publicly saying, I never told you to get rid of Mueller. Isn't that sort of coaching a witness?
First of all, I can't tell you what's false and not about. Some of it I think is demonstrably false. But in any event, all you have to do is read some of the opposing statements, which they bother to conveniently leave out. But no, even if it's true, it is not. Because Mark Penn was right about this, too. And this anybody who works for him will probably tell you this. After 3 or 4 of those, if they're true, right, and other ones, don't you get the point? I mean, those aren't like real orders. I'll tell you, when he wants to fire somebody, ask Jim Comey if he can fire somebody. So if he was really upset that Sessions wasn't fired, or he really wanted him fired, he'd have fired him.
But what about trying to get somebody to change their story when they're talking to the special counsel?
Well, first of all, who says that's true? And there is a even a special counsel, if you read it carefully, says there are differing recollections about this little thing in the middle of 400 pages. I know what they mean about that. there are differing recollections, meaning there are people, not just the president, because I never talked to him, there are people they have that are saying it isn't quite the way it's being related by one person and being interpreted by you. So the reality is no harm, no foul. Mark Penn is correct. Yes, he ruminated. Yes, he got angry. Yes, he got upset. But after a while, you realize these messages were never delivered. There's a pattern there. And the pattern is he didn't mean them to be delivered.
All right.
And they weren't. And most of them, I got to tell you, and this is really the annoying part, because they're sneaky and slimy, most of them are not true, or at least they're in substantial doubt from a lawyer's point of view. And those doubts are not conveyed to the reader.
Rudy, I'll talk to you on radio a little bit later. Thanks so much.